We're going to kick off after lunch talking about tech, innovation, how it might help. It's always excellent. Do take a seat. Very good. Good to see you back from lunch. So your moderator is Paul Weisenfeld. He's the Executive Vice President of International Development at RTI International. When I asked him how optimistic he was feeling, he said, I'm an 8 out of 10. It's pretty good, because when we're looking at tech, we're looking at possibilities. When I asked him about how he approached his moderating, he said, I'm no longer eye candy, so I will settle for being charming. You can judge for yourself whether he's eye candy and charming, or eye candy or just charming. Paul, bring your panel out. Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, about another 15 seconds of that rousing applause. Perfect.
Thank you, Femi. What a tremendous introduction. So I am really excited because we have, I know I'm biased, but I think we have the most interesting topic of the whole session. And we have the most dynamic panel because we've been having a tremendously dynamic conversation backstage. And we're going to continue it up here, and I think people are going to say, why wasn't the rest of the session as good as this? So our topic is connecting food systems to the information economy. So we're talking about the digital economy, the digital revolution that we're all experiencing. We know that in our lifetimes, we've seen how digital technologies have revolutionized the way that we live and work. They've taken off worldwide across virtually all areas of work. In the agriculture sector, many of us think that digital technologies can be a critical tool to transform developing country agriculture sector economies, making them more connected to markets. And youth in particular, who have such a facility with digital technologies, really can play a key role in spearheading this transition. Digital innovations have helped reduce information failures. They give people access to market information, weather information, information on pests and diseases. But they're not a panacea, as we'll discuss. In the knowledge economy of today, you have to have knowledge to get ahead. You have to have knowledge to benefit from new tools. So digital literacy, connectivity are vital if rural and food insecure populations are not left behind. So let me introduce our panel and get started right in it. At the end, we have Joseph Ogutu. He's Director of Strategy and Innovation at Safaricom. Next to him, we have Jessica Francisca Colaco, who is Director of Growth at Brave Venture Labs. And then we have Ricken Gandhi, who is the CEO of Digital Green. And to my immediate left, we have Sarah Hunter, Director of Public Policy at X, the Moonshot Factory. So let's start with Jessica. So Jessica, you co-founded an innovation lab in Nairobi, iHub. Tell us a little bit about the innovation lab and the space involved. Digital technology is out there in the ether, so why do we need physical spaces in order to promote innovation?
Thank you very much. We started iHub in 2010 because there was the growth of what you call the developer ecosystem way back in 2006 and 2007 in Nairobi, Kenya. My background is actually a computer scientist, software engineer, and I would say I was like really, really shy, but I would actually meet up with a group of developers before 2010, and we'd meet up in coffee shops and just have hackathons together. And this actually brought around the ethos of actually having a shared space whereby developers could come together at a hacker space and actually bring like minds together, the brightest minds sharing ideas. And the idea of actually setting up the iHub was to set it up more for the community and let community come together and share ideas, and eventually turned entrepreneurial and what we see being called the Silicon Savannah to date in Kenya and East Africa.
Thank you. And Ricken, kind of just briefly tell us about your really innovative work that's taken off using short video technology to provide training to farmers in many countries around the world. How has that kind of opened possibilities for leapfrogging?
Yeah, so At Digital Green, we partner with existing agricultural extension providers, largely government ministries of agriculture and rural development, who are already involved in training farmers. And we train them to produce short videos that are by farmers and for farmers to exchange these practices more efficiently. First questions people ask often is, what's the name of the person in the video and which village is he or she from, before asking anything about the economics of the practice. We collect data and feedback about who watched what video, what practices they actually did, and then use that to inform and target the production and distribution of the next set of videos. So we do this across 9 countries with about 1.5 million odd farmers. In addition to this sort of information sharing work, we also have realized that farmers also need to be able to take their produce to market to get more money in their pockets. So about 2 years ago, we also introduced a shared transport to market service where farmers are able to request for pickups for their perishable horticulture produce. We match that with nearby transporters to make the pickups, move the produce to wholesale, and pay the farmers back via mobile money. And so that's what we found to be impactful at Digital Green.
That's fabulous. A lot of the connectivity issues depend on being connected. And rural areas often, even in wealthy countries, are not completely connected. If digital technology is going to be transformative, how do you deal with these issues of bringing connectivity to broad populations? I don't know, Sarah, you want to jump in on that point?
Sure. So I think the starting point to just level set where we are, only 50% of the world currently have the internet. So we were hearing earlier today about, some countries 95% mobile penetration. Yes, but they can only use phones in urban settings, right? So if we want to get the internet benefits to everyone, we need to increase that to a much wider percentage of the world. And most people think that next 50% of the world will be a much slower uptake if we use the existing methods that we've used to date. So at X, we were Google's secret factory, and now we're an independent company. And we look at finding new technologies to solve big world problems. So for us, this is totally our sweet spot. And actually, we've started from that position of, well, what else could we do? What other new solutions could we bring to internet connectivity that haven't been used before? So we've got a couple of projects. One of them is called Project Loon, which is using stratospheric balloons to provide internet to the world below. Sounds crazy, hence the name Project Loon. But actually, it's kind of working. We did some really great tests. We've been doing it for about 6 years, and actually we managed to provide some service in Peru and Puerto Rico last year after the natural disasters. And then we've got another project using free space optics, which is sort of like, imagine fiber but without the cable. So it's using light to deliver the data. So there's those projects. We've got, there are other projects that other companies are working on. And I'm pretty optimistic, actually, that the new technology thinking can bring these new solutions in partnership, actually, with the telco companies. I mean, Safaricom and others are also looking at new innovative solutions. It's just, the take-up, we need to speed it up, basically.
So you gave us a great segue to Joseph. After Joseph, we want to come back, and I think it'd be really interesting to hear financing, is how we finance these kind of moonshot opportunities. But Joseph, Safaricom is an absolute leader in Africa on connectivity issues, notably on mobile payments. Kind of, how do you think about some of these new technology issues that Sarah raised, and kind of what's in it for Safaricom in this space?
Yeah, so for those who may not know, Safaricom is a mobile operator. It's about 17 years old. It's a joint venture between Vodafone and government of Kenya. Now, we have been in the market now for 17 years, as I said, and we have been able to really spread out the coverage across the country. And so now we have about 93 to 95% penetration into the market. So the devices are available. They are in the hands of people. But even with that ubiquity, what else can you offer people beyond the communication? And so we are now starting to talk about the connected worker, the connected student, the connected farmer. Basically saying that you can do a lot more with that device. And so today, with that device, and I can say now, A lot of people are getting their first internet experience using the mobile phone. And because of that, with the mobile phone, it has now become a way of getting information. It has become a way of transacting financial services. It has become a way of accessing affordable medical care. It has become a way of educating the farmer and actually intervening in the value and supply chain to create efficiencies even in that sector.
Thank you. Sarah, let's kind of go back to you, like financing of these options. How does that happen? Particularly if we want the technology to reach vulnerable populations in developing countries, how do we kind of move and get?
Well, I'm curious what everyone else's views here. We firmly believe that a for-profit model is the most sustainable long-term way that you can actually make change. You know, philanthropy and investment from governments is great in other circumstances, but if our view is that actually if you really want to make a big-scale difference to so many people, having a profit motivation really helps drive that innovation and that focus on the consumer. Because ultimately that's what's going to make you successful, and generating revenue is a great indication that you've got a consumer who really wants what it is you're offering. But I actually think, you know, the relationship between tech companies and people on the ground needs to evolve, frankly, to be able to address the problems. You know, I think today we were hearing a lot about how people like us in this room make assumptions about what real people want, and you know, valley companies are never going to have people on the ground as well connected as, you know, the farmer federations. And so actually those sort of relationships, I think, how do we make those relationships really constructive and a listening one is I think, the bigger question rather than financing it.
And Jessica wants to jump in here.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about that because it's all about the people.
Right.
I think I've embraced this paradigm of intentional serendipity. It's meeting the right people at the right time for the right opportunities, and really places like the iHub actually got communities together, not only formed entrepreneurs, but allowed other people in the communities to come together. And I believe the entrepreneur from MFARM is here. Her name is Linda. She's in the crowd somewhere. She actually came out from the iHub, met different people. You have to be on the ground. So it brings up all these relevant issues of, yes, while we're thinking about food security and the topic here, youth for growth, a lot of things come into place. You have to think about the physical infrastructure to enable entrepreneurship to happen, but also companies like yours reaching the last mile connection, the data. We also have to think about other partnerships like the telcos coming in to provide that infrastructure and the payment services, the R&D going on. So I think tech hubs are a part of this. My current business, Brave, right now, when you talk about food security, there's a lot of technologies that go behind this, right? Like your cognitive, computer science, computational science, and you need the talent on the ground doing this. And this is what my current company, Brave, focuses on, helping companies like this find the right talent. Software engineers, data scientists, where do you find them? Yes, we have the infrastructure, we have the regulation, but what do the entrepreneurs and the people on the ground need to actually bridge the entire gap missing so we can actually have a more holistic end-to-end solution?
Ricken, do you want to jump in?
I was just going to add to the point on the financing one. I think it might also be useful to talk about what is the core business model that drives these new services, whether through connectivity or just applications on top of the connectivity, are driving. I think if in the last couple of days where we've been hearing all this news about Facebook and where their business model is kind of derived largely by our data, what's the learning then for us if we want to make sure that our business models are aligned more closely to improving the economic position and well-being of youth in agriculture? Mm-hmm. How can we align our business models to be more in sync with making sure that companies that are engaging in that space, whether on connectivity or applications, their growth is based on the growth of these young people's well-being. I think there's a lot to be sort of unpacked there with regard to making sure that, yeah, is the young farmer really increasing their income or their nutritional well-being, and can we create business models that sort of are shared with that ultimate impact proposition as opposed to, for instance, advertising-based models?
So, you know, comments from you make me think that governments are, I think you're absolutely right, Sarah, private sector models have to drive this for it to work and be sustainable. Same time, you have governments itching to do something. They want to move their country into the modern economy, into the innovation space. They want to lift people out of poverty, drive technology in agriculture. So what is government most helpful playing here? Is it driving digital literacy? How can government be a helpful partner?
Yeah. If I may
Joseph,
jump,
yeah.
Clearly the government has a role to play. In the report that was released this morning, we talked about constraints that may make it difficult for young people to get into agriculture, for instance. One of the biggest constraints is the land tenure system. Now, the land tenure system is hugely against the young people. It is against the young people in this sense that a lot of our land has been subdivided. It's a smallholder family land. And you get a family like mine where there are 7 brothers and 1 sister to share that small piece of land. Already there's a challenge there. There's a challenge because the holdings are small. Mechanization becomes very difficult in that kind of environment. So then what do? The solution surely must be in trying to improve productivity even within the existing land tenure system. And that is where then technology then comes in. And technology comes in this way. You're looking at the value chain, and you want to see the points of greatest inefficiency. And you find that, one, the farmer is at a disadvantage. He has no full information about the marketplace. The farmer today also has limited information in terms of what are the right inputs for his unit. The farmer also has a challenge because he has to work through a middleman. And the middleman sort of makes sure that the full information is not available to the farmer, therefore he can make a killing. So technology then comes in by ensuring that this farmer has got the information which previously he would not have had access to. This farmer has an opportunity to access quality inputs at affordable prices. So in our case, we are working with government to ensure that there are inputs available at subsidized rates. So what we offer is a platform where the farmers are registered. The government sends tokens to those registered farmers. Those tokens are then redeemed at designated shops for them to access inputs. So immediately with that, there's opportunity for them to increase their production. There's also the fact that it is possible to use the information that is now available to create a credit reference. Mm-hmm. We are a mobile company. We've got something. I have to be careful after listening to the interview yesterday on CNN, Mark Zuckerberg, we have to be careful how we use information. But information is available and can be crowdsourced to start building a database for credit reference. So this farmer who initially or previously could not access credit, with the information that is available, can start accessing credit because now it is crowdsourced, it's available, and therefore you can talk about lending based on some kind of knowledge.
Yeah. Jessica's wanting to jump in.
Yeah, it really keeps me, this keeps me roaring because we tend to use a lot of buzzwords like the sharing economy and the knowledge economy. And I'd just like to use a quote from Albert Einstein, and where he says that imagination is more important than knowledge. Yes, we are in the knowledge economy and we have all this data going on, but I think what is really, really useful to the end user and the farmer here, right? And the consumers of their produce is really, what do the end consumers want? And we were having a really nice discussion backstage, and which I bring here to the floor, and Sarah can pitch in with me, is that you have to know what's going on the ground in order to actually make a long-lasting solution for the end user and the farmers. So yes, Joe, technology is an enabler, but I think this is where entrepreneurs play a key role with research, right? And commercial models, whereby we have to use our imagination. We hear a lot of buzzwords in this day and age: machine learning, big data, blockchain. Yes, those are all enablers, but how do we use those technologies for the farmer? So when it comes to blockchain, for example, the farmer can have a unique ID, and with blockchain, it being immutable, like you can access every single data point on the farmer from the time they started to be a farmer. So this is where I think telco and government should come in, is by enabling the smallholder farmers to have a basic digital profile even they can access. And receive not only like loans and all just from one financial institution, but they can actually have like a footprint they can use in East Africa or other regions where they would actually be beneficial to them. And I think, Sarah, probably you could mention a little more about why R&D.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And it feels wrong for someone who is both British and from Silicon Valley to talk about being more connected on the ground in Africa. Like, I'm the last person to, but I know that that's not my skill. And I know that actually there are individuals and organizations who are much better at that than we are, and therefore actually that partnership is crucial. I mean, just going to the question of what can government do, because so much of what we do, I think, is in the hands of the engineer, like the creative, well-informed sort of, team of engineers who can come up with these amazing solutions. From a government perspective, actually, I think there is an important role which is around the infrastructure. We've known for generations that the infrastructure is what governments do. Roads, airports, like that. Those basic investment in building blocks on which communities and innovators can build. I think the internet should be seen as one of those basic infrastructure needs in the 21st century, and not just 2G internet, like fast, ubiquitous internet. So not just enable communities to make a living and to thrive as entrepreneurs, but actually to be able to come up to the same level of global trade as other countries. If we allow the developing world to be okay with 2G, then we're never going to rebalance the world economy in the way we need to. So I think there's a sort of a government should set that as one of their basic infrastructure goals, and then actually you unleash all kinds of other things on top of it.
So Joseph raised Facebook. I think someone else raised Facebook. Can I ask you guys specifically about social media and data? So social media, I think, is a very powerful tool. When we were talking before, I relayed the story. I was in Uganda a year and a half ago, and I had a driver driving me around, and every stop sign he was on his phone in a WhatsApp group with a group of farmers getting advice on a sick cow. And I asked him, did someone help you? Did some donor or government or someone help you do this? And he said, no, as soon as we got the smartphone, we figured out how to do this and created our own WhatsApp group, and we know who the good advisors are. So technology is powerful in the hands of young people who can make the most of it. But we have these issues around data privacy, respecting the privacy of data. A lot of the data is privately held by companies. How do you use it in ways that benefit larger groups? There's a lot of stuff packed in there. But I don't know what you guys are thinking along those lines. How can social media be powerful while we're conscious of the need to respect private data? And we also, accessing the data and doing research around it is going to reveal some important insights.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that I think what you see on social media, although it seems like new and novel, at the same time, it's kind of what people have been doing all the time. when you look at agricultural extension and what are the sources of information that farmers rely on and actually apply, the first sources of information are not the extension officer or even the agro dealer. They're fellow farmers.
Yes.
They're neighbors, they're family members.
Ones they know
Who they trust. And now with social media or even just, phones in general, people are able to do that kind of person-to-person interaction all the more sort of efficiently. But the same sort of dynamics are sort of true, which is you trust somebody who is similar to you or that you have some sort of familial relationship with. And yeah, I think at the moment, there are all these questions about all these sort of centralized companies that are holding all of our kind of collective data. Is that the model of the future? Perhaps not. There may be a model in the future, especially with things like blockchain and whatnot, where there might be a more decentralized model where you and I are able to hold our own data and expose whatever bits of that data that we feel would be mutually beneficial. And I think that's probably where we eventually end up, especially given like what we're seeing, with like the Facebook kind of issues.
I think with social media, especially like Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, the first thing you think about is actually communicating with each other. So you actually create a level of trust. Now, something that you can actually piggyback on and add a tier, layers to, is that once you've established that basic trust between, let's say we form a group here and we're already chatting with each other behind stage, we started forming that basic interaction and the trust. What entrepreneurs can do, and I come to you being innovative here, is actually analyzing with the permission of the farmers, is the ability to analyze the conversations going on. And Cambridge Analytica actually does this. It actually analyzes all your tweets and social media activity and makes analysis on you. So you can actually like create what you call like a neural net, which actually can analyze. This is going like a step higher than just that personal interaction on WhatsApp, but adding technology as the enabler. And this is where you need really powerful servers to run. This is where local government can come in with cloud computing and the infrastructure needed. This is building actually onto the internet, and what you mentioned is the ability to actually empower the entrepreneurs creating these solutions to actually create smart technology on top of this and actually get some outputs of what...
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think we all were, the MIT guy who spoke super quick earlier, like totally mind-blowing, great stuff. That is what's exciting about technology. I mean, don't get me wrong, communication, I love it. We should all communicate more. Social media tools are very powerful. But that next layer of what is about to come with technology could transform so much more than just talking to each other. And actually, that's where having technology tools in the hands of people who live in Nairobi is going to transform, I think, farming.
And the beautiful part about that, Sarah, is the farmers don't need to know what's going on in the background. It's a black box. It's our role as technologists to create these applications for them. Joe can give an example exactly of how M-Pesa works. It's simple money transfer and paying for your utilities. It's so amazing. I can actually even use it here right now to pay my bills or send money to my family. And you don't know what's going on in the background because I don't need to. It does the basic function for me. And that's where you have each stakeholder playing their key role in this ecosystem.
So
I just wanted to add
a
point that, yes, privacy is absolutely important, but let's not push it to a level where we then don't make use of the huge amounts of data that we sit on, which could then be applied in a very, very positive way. So it's unfortunate that bad news travels fast and wide. But I think we must have a sense of balance here. Yeah, we are sitting on data. This data can be useful. So we need just to work on structures that allow those whose data we have to either give their okay, or, you know, but my message, let's not be too restrictive to the extent that we therefore are paralyzed to make use of the information that we have.
Thanks, Joe. So I'm getting the sign that we have a question. We've switched to the questions session. So anyone can jump in and answer. I think you guys can see the question for the audience. How can we leverage digital platforms to engage youth and amplify their voices? How do we make sure the youth don't get left behind, in other words?
I'm not young anymore. I'm afraid I have to hand it. I definitely think you're younger than me. Go ahead.
I mean, I think, what we found is like the same dynamics that, I guess sitting here in the West that you're all familiar with, of things like, American Idol or whatnot, also are true even for young people in rural Kenya, for instance. I mean, there's a show in Kenya, right, Shamba Shape Up, and similar kinds of shows that, are trying to breed some kind of competition amongst young people to think of agriculture as a source of livelihood. I mean, in a place like India, agriculture, when you look at like mainstream media, is characterized by stories of farmers committing suicide. And so if you can just imagine what that does to you as a person in that vocation, it suggests like that this is no longer something that anyone should be doing. And maybe it might be true that some people are going to be moving out of agriculture. But at the same time, I think the way to really amplify the young people's voices, to put their voices front and center, to be able to appeal to fellow young people, and to use tech, right? Given the fact that tech attracts, young people are attracted by two things, right? Money and status, largely, in addition to perhaps more enlightened things. And so if you can use digital kind of tools to create those natural incentives for both, whether it is like making farming actually a prosperous business, and then number two, that you're able to professionalize that vocation so that people can see it as something that people do and not just like everyone who didn't get into the best school has to do. That to me, I think, is what's key.
Just to add on to that point is, I think probably Joe can tag team on with me. In Kenya, a lot of the young people are getting into farming, right? Because they actually see the opportunity, and they're like smallholder farmers who are actually young people live in urban areas but actually have like land which they either leasing from their family or they've leased out from their friends and family. And I think it's less about technology. It's more like technology being the enabler to actually like help the youth see other channels of employment for them, and also food production. This comes to like the food security and also more organic, right? So the platforms can be more of not only on the end of like helping farmers improve their productivity, but also like how the youth of this millennium, the millennials right now, how they can actually contribute to food productivity, food security, be organic, lifestyle comes in, right? So having like this just go about the more from primary, but actually adding value at, hey, actually you can actually have an urban farm, right? We were talking about this again backstage, having an urban farm, and how do you also become a smallholder farmer? How do you help the stakeholders around you? I think it's more of having like good stories to tell.
So let's take a question from the audience. And while we're identifying someone, I don't know who has the microphone. I think one of the things that'd be good for us to think about too is, we answer the question, is the entire value chain, not just on farm, but off farm, and how technology can be helpful in spurring innovation and youth involvement for our farm as well. Any questions in the audience? Maybe not. So, sorry, right here.
Can you talk a little bit about the way you assess impact, especially in the context of using new technologies in new geographies? And have you had any failure stories with that? Just more interesting than Sussex stories, I'm sure.
Who wants to jump in and handle that about assessing impact?
Yeah, I can talk about that. We think about it a lot at X. And one of the challenges we have is that we're doing a lot of very early stage innovation. So a lot of in-lab and then early interaction in a sort of sandbox setting, in a pilot setting, at the stage at which actually long-term impact is impossible to even anticipate, let alone measure. So we think about it a lot. How do we ensure that a team is set up to be looking for impact and able to assess impact when it starts to come through? But even at that early stage innovation, we do work a lot with experts in the field to try and draw those models and draw those pictures of sort of what are the unintended consequences we might not be seeing from our sort of lab in California. And are those unintended consequences mitigatable? Like, can we put in place guardrails to stop ourselves falling into those traps or not? So it's very complicated. And actually, I think RISE, they do some really interesting work around tangible measurement of impact with later stage innovation and companies. But for us at that early stage, it's more a quest of imagination and listening and debating with experts than it is measurement.
I'd just like to add on to when the iHub was formed in 2010, 2.5 years later, we set up what you call a user experience lab, and we brought what you called paradigms like human-centered design. And I think something that's actually important and leading to a point that I said, you have to know what's going on the ground. It's just not, hey, I'm looking around and I know what's going on the ground, but something very important for entrepreneurs alike to develop is empathy. How do you develop empathy? And there are various ways and methodologies to developing empathy for your users on the field. So I think like the digital platforms in education and skill development, when the user experience lab was set up at the iHub, I mean, there's so many platforms right now. Udacity, IDEO has set up a local lab in Nairobi as well. They actually teach courses, and there's so many courses online that can actually help young entrepreneurs alike working on these technologies to actually develop empathy for the end user. So this is piggybacking on like what physical hubs have set out to do and what are the like ripple effects and the value adds of the entire ecosystem as a whole. Yeah.
Thanks.
So if I may just add very quickly, the question of impact is hugely important. Let me give you one example of a company that we have worked with, which is called Sirikwa Dairies. Sirikwa Dairies is part of our Connected Farmer Alliance, which is a platform that we developed together with Mezzanine Ware. Now, Mezzanine Ware, they focus on developing business solutions. And so we worked with them to provide a platform that enables this agri-processing company to be able, A, to provide information and to receive information from the farmers. It enables them to, it enables their field officers to upload information immediately about farmers and about quantities that are coming. To cut a long story short, what has happened is that through that platform, production of milk has almost tripled. Payment has become almost immediate upon receipt or upon receiving milk at the dairy shop. It has become much easier for the dairy farm to anticipate the quantities that are going to come on that day and therefore prepare for it, turn around much more quickly. And all this has been enabled by technology. But the issue of impact is hugely important. Otherwise, we're just paying lip service.
So, go ahead, Rick, and then there's a specific question on the board for Joseph, but go ahead, Rick.
Sorry, I was just going to add, just to kind of give like kind of two sort of like failure examples, right, that we've kind of experienced ourselves in our own work with regard to technology and metrics. So I think like with regard to the metrics question, especially when you're applying technology, that largely you go by the existing metrics that are used to evaluate impact, even without technology. and that's your control comparison, right? Whether you're looking at net income effects, inclusivity measures, or resilience measures, what have you. But with the opportunity cost and additional cost that technology affords, you should be really doing a control comparison of these two. Now, two examples. One, in Ethiopia, we were producing and sharing videos with the government of Ethiopia, and a lot of these videos featured lead farmers. And what ended up happening was the farmers who would adopt these practices were other lead farmers, to the exclusion of like the majority, like 80% of farmers who are the small and marginal farmers. So what do we do about it? We're like, hey, we got to produce videos that feature the marginal farmers to appeal to the other people who represent the majority of the actual community. In India, we were working on a mobile advisory service. And as some may know, there's a lot of studies that have shown that basically women have a disproportionately limited access to like mobile phones relative to male counterparts. And so essentially, this mobile service was not reaching any women. And so we realized that, well, we got to engage women who represent the majority of agricultural labor in a place like India now. And so we got to reach them through some other channel, because at present, mobile is not the solution. So yeah, those are just kind of some examples.
Thanks. Very powerful examples. Joe, I don't know if you see the specific question for you. What's the most popular feature for farmers besides payments?
Right. I think the most important thing for the farmer is to be able to get the inputs as quickly as possible in time to prepare his farm. And the farmer doesn't want the burden of taking the produce to the market. If somebody else can do that for the farmer efficiently and give him a good price, that's a huge headache of them. So yes, price is important, but an efficient value chain and supply chain is absolutely critical for the farmer.
So I think we have time for one more question from the audience, if there's a question. Yeah, there's one back here. Julie. Someone raised their hand, and I actually know their name. I'm feeling good about it.
Hi.
I actually know everyone's name.
Yeah, you shouldn't have given that away, should you?
Julie Howard from Michigan State and CSIS. We've kind of been talking about IT as an unmitigated good in this conversation. So I sort of wanted to bring us back to some of the headlines we've been reading about here and say, well, what if it's not an unmitigated good for youth and other users of information technology? So what kind of protections might we need to think about? What sort of questions should we be asking at this point before we jump headlong into digital nirvana?
How do we actually prevent an Orwellian future through technology?
I mean, it's not an unmitigated good. I don't think you should be under any illusions. No powerful tool is all good with no bad. And I think that's something, it's not just about technology, it's about tools in general. They need to be used responsibly, and they need to be used in a way that is in pursuit of the good, because other people will use it in the pursuit of the bad. I don't think that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. What do we have to do? I think it's very specific. I mean, tech, we're talking about tech in this enormous sense. Actually, there's no tech in a whole sector. They're all applied in different circumstances. And so how do we ensure that the technology tools applied to agriculture are used in a way that mitigates against the bad but maximizes the good is the question, not tech in general, I think. I think we've talked about some of that earlier, but I think privacy of data is one of the big things that technologists and people using big data need to be very mindful of. But also it goes to the question earlier about how do you keep an eye on the social impact? Like, how do you ensure that companies and individuals using these technologies are always looking at those unintended consequences and trying to put in place guardrails to avoid them? I think it's a constant task. I don't think you can say when you invent something, I've made it perfect. It's about the application and the doing of it that's the trick.
Sarah, you have wrapped up beautifully for us. I think
marvelous.
those are time's up. I think those messages that you said at the end really highlight for all of us our responsibility as actors in this space to make sure we use technology for the benefit of the vulnerable communities. So thank you to everyone on the panel. Please join me in thanking the panel.